Why is skinny shaming not considered as bad as fat shaming? Because being skinny is seen as desirable, so skinny shaming is seen as a punch up and not a punch down. All body shaming is wrong, and I don't agree that skinny shaming is okay, but this is an insight into why it's seen as okay. Because being skinny is seen as desirable. It looks like OP is a he, like me, and being skinny is definitely not desirable for us, lol. At least being slim usually means you still have some muscle. Even if not a lot, it's better than being skinny. It's likely more a function of numbers than anything else. When you consider that about 70% of adults are overweight or obese, and only something like 1.5% are underweight, the 1.5% just doesn't get the same attention. Not saying that makes it okay, but that has got to be a major factor, at least from an awareness standpoint. This is the true answer, OP. People have a harder time empathizing with people who are different to them, so the overweight and just not skinny majority don't see the problem with body shaming unless it targets them. It's very stressful for me too. I actually have a history of anorexia, and when people comment on my food intake it makes me so uncomfortable and I want to just leave. I have noticed that men tend to get more shamed for being skinny and women get fat shamed more. But since women are more likely to talk about being body shamed, people tend to focus more on women. It is crappy either way. People are way too nosy and really should shut up about people's weight. Same. I'm a bony boy and notice that my weight was talked about more if it was between me and an overweight person in the room. I'm older now and stopped giving a frick, but the self-esteem issues I had when people make a circle around my wrist, or tell me to eat more, or lift some weights. I freaking try. As a dude who is a kinesiology major and eats more than anyone I know, I have hated my body my entire life from people feeling the need to point out how skinny I am. It's especially frustrating because I'm thin, not skinny, and in no way look malnourished as they seem to think. It's rough and has occupied my every thought around any reflective surface. It's probably because thin girls were at the forefront of advertisements for what was considered attractive up until the last couple of years. Most things in the likes of fashion are tailored to thinner people too. I know how you feel. I've always been classed underweight by BMI and it sucks, but it's just how our society is conditioned nowadays. Sorry that you're going through all that. Try not to let it affect your self-esteem much. There are always options you can look at to help with your self-image. As long as you're a girl, people will always body shame no matter what your body type. Even if you do have the perfect body type, people will still somehow find a way to try and put you down. There is no winning, TBH. I think many people don't quite understand that people who are naturally skinny don't choose their body. A majority of people gain weight quite easily and see all skinny people as dieters who eat very little, which is not the case. So, I think it's about lack of understanding body types and insecurity from those who are overweight. It's not a joke. It should be taken seriously. There are also a lot more deeper structural issues people face for being perceived as over fat versus skinny, so that is important to remember. Oh my god, you are so skinny. Are you eating well? It's not healthy to eat this little. You need to eat more. Is that everything you are eating have eaten? That's not good for you. You need to eat. No wonder you are so slim. Or, wow, your arm, legs, any other body part are so thin. That's not healthy. Blah blah blah. Imagine telling someone, wow, you've gotten so fat. That's not healthy. You need to eat less. Look at your arm. It's the size of my waist. Mainly because of social expectations. While you may occasionally be shamed for being skinny, for the most part it is considered the proper body type. Most people who look at you will not shame you, and will think that you look the way you're supposed to. People will view you differently because you were skinny, and you meet social expectations better. I have been on both sides of this. I grew up super morbidly obese, and had a BMI of 51 at my highest. After bariatric surgery I lost the weight and I am now quite thin. I had people make comments about me when I was fat, and I have people make comments about me when I'm skinny, but the comments from when I was fat hurt way more. And that's because I was raised, like men or women, to things that I had to look a certain way, and being fat was not a part of that. Being fat made me feel disgusting and unlovable. While I will have people sometimes shame me for being skinny, tell me that I need to eat more, or comment on my food choices, the general reception that I get is much more positive. And most of the people who shame me for being thin are actually fat, so it kind of just seems like they're jealous. My current body is one that is not only socially accepted, but socially desired. I fit into sample size clothes, and can go to sample sales and buy things off the rack if I want to because I wear sizes 2 and 4. After a lifetime of being fat, nothing anyone says about me being skinny makes me feel the least bit ashamed or embarrassed. I think I can explain it. This coming from someone who has been both overweight and underweight, highest 200 pounds, lowest 95 lbs, so I have legitimately experienced both sides to an extent. Of course both skinny and fat shaming exist, and they are both horrible. Neither feel good to be at the receiving end of, and, truly, when it comes to shaming I don't think either is worse or better than the other. Both are harmful. However, most modern societies value thinness and demonize fatness. There is a hugely pervasive diet and exercise culture, and the media perpetuates the idea that skinny is good and skinny is better. In that sense, some may argue that it is a less painful blow to be called too skinny. Being called fat has been made into the ultimate insult in modern culture. Further, while body size insecurities are something everyone can experience, there is a big difference in society between being seen as too large versus too small. There are actual systematic disadvantages to being larger. Fat people are denied healthcare, seats on planes, and have a hard time finding clothes that can fit them. I understand super thin people may also struggle to find well-fitting clothes, but they can at least always find something that covers them. Unfortunately, thin privilege does exist, and many thin people have never had to consider what struggles larger people go through. Finally, I would like to say that I am so sorry you have had to experience this bullying from people. I cannot imagine ever having the gall, or desire, to say to someone what people have said to you. Your pain and frustration are completely valid. I hope you know how beautiful you are. As a mother of someone who used to go into a rage for being called skinny, I feel your pain. I think people don't realize that not all people desire to be labeled that way. Although she is now older and a mom and of course, more accepting of her petiteness, when she was younger we handled it in two ways. After someone called her skinny if alone, she would deadpan that the anorexia was working, and thank the person for giving her the courage to commit because she was really feeling like eating. And if with me, I'd call her fat kid. Regardless of size, it's no one's right to make you feel any type of way about yourself. As a girl I can say for us it feels like our entire worth is based on the number that shows up on a scale. Everything geared towards us is for beauty, and beauty standards are being impossibly skinny. I was fat once, but I lost weight and I never realized how the world was simply not built for fat me. Suddenly I could buy clothes anywhere, and look more like the average girl I would see. People were quite literally nicer to me. That was the most surprising part. It is so much easier to be told to eat a burger than to be told to lose 40 pounds. The world is not kind to fat girls, and simply does not like them. And even though I'm not a man, I can only imagine how hard it is for y'all as well. The unrealistic standards for anyone simply is not fair. We are human and we come in all shapes and sizes. Why is it only a handful that are acceptable? I think this is a great question. I'm very thin as well, and I have also gotten negative comments about it. The reason fat shaming is considered worse is that being overweight also brings a lot of systemic disadvantages. Medical discrimination, job and workplace discrimination, the financial burden of frequently having to pay more for specialized clothing or accommodation items, to being less likely to be believed when reporting sexual assault. There's more, but it's pervasive in most cultures. Skinny shaming is wrong, and it should definitely stop. I hate that people think it's hilarious to tell me to just eat more or you would be really pretty if you gained some weight, but being thin doesn't come with the systemic discrimination of being overweight. As a fat woman, I apologize for the personal suffering you've endured, and appreciate your gracefulness and compassion in understanding the plight of fat people such as myself. I think both are bad and unacceptable, but fat people are literally systemically discriminated against. People are turned down from jobs because they're larger. It's harder for them to find clothing. And a lot of fat people literally die from treatable conditions because medical professionals just tell them to lose weight. Smaller bodied people aren't discriminated against in the same way. They're made fun of, which is awful, rude, and inappropriate. But they usually don't die because of that sort of shaming. 100%. You put it far better than I did. It doesn't lessen the impact of UP's experiences, or take anything away from them, but it isn't a one-to-one comparison. It should be. I think it's despicable that "go eat a cheeseburger" is said by the same people who moan about being teased for being overweight, or that they can't control their weight. I don't understand how they didn't develop empathy for anyone receiving harassment. Body shaming isn't cool no matter what, but our society puts more value into being skinny than fat generally. Although I think people get concerned when someone gets too skinny. They may not be trying to be rude, but I can see how it can come off that way. That being said, this should really only upset you if you have low self-esteem due to be too skinny. If you can find a way to be confident in your body type and learn to ignore the negative comments, it might not bother you so much. More often when people body shame, it's a reflection of them and their insecurities rather than your looks specifically. I agree with you. As a curvy woman, I find it offensive when people turn the tables and body shame or poke fun of slender people. It's hurtful. I get that it's a way to try and feel empowered, but it's actually disempowering to criticize someone else to make ourselves feel better. When I heard Meghan Trainor call other women skinny being all about that bass, it was so upsetting. What a great and empowering song. And she completely ruined it with that one line. No kind of body shaming is okay, whether it's about size, weight, height, skin color, ability. We need to learn to be respectful and to appreciate the different forms of beauty in the world. Unfortunately, humanity sucks, so we'll probably be extinct before we get mature enough as a society to stop this crap. Because being skinny is the standard of beauty. Actually, it's the standard for a lot of things. Arguably, fat people get bullied a lot more, especially for doing things that nobody would bat an eye at if they were skinny, particularly in wearing certain kinds of clothing. I mean, fat people get comments like "you're so brave," 3 inches for just posting a selfie, or "they're fit for the day." I think the real answer is that no matter what kind of shaming is going on, it's not okay. Everyone has different reasons for their body size, and that's okay. We shouldn't compare or compete for who's being bullied more either. Because being skinny is the standard of beauty. Definitely not for men. It is. Only thoughtless imbeciles think is not. There's even people that go from one extreme to the other. Both are unhealthy. What bothers me is that when I was healthy, fit and skinny, I got jokes. Now that I'm chubby, unfit and sick because of it, people tell me I look good. Just because so many people are obese, it doesn't make me look better, let alone be healthier. If I could get back down to 125, and that's still overweight for me, BMI 140 pounds for me has made it hard for me to tie my shoes, bend over, do exercise, and has murdered my hips and knees to the point I can't walk too long. But I'd rather get the kind of jokes about being a small person than slowly die like this. As a culture, we push for skinny, so skinny is seen as desirable and fat isn't. This leads more towards a view that skinny is something that you've tried to achieve, and overly skinny is intentional. Even amongst people who are overweight due to their own choices rather than genetics, the overweight isn't something they've tried to achieve, it's a consequence of other choices, whereas skinny is often the desired goal. There's also a longer history of fat being shamed and shunned while skinny is embraced, so cracking down on fat shaming is a more visible part of anti-bullying. Because it's socially acceptable to be skinny, not so much as being fat. Don't get me wrong, any body shaming is gross, but it's not as socially acceptable to be fat. Because there's a ton of affirmation that being skinny is good, great, okay, preferable, etc. Getting one insult hurled the way of skinnies is like one negative to a ton of positives. The idea is that it's not like it's gonna really alter the way you and others view skinny people. Skinny people are still going to be preferred, especially in the scheme of recent times. Any fat positivity is pretty recent, so there's history to contend with. Also, not saying it's good, just trying to give some reasons. It's seen as punching up versus punching down. Fat people are perceived to know it's a problem since Well, it's constantly mocked in every form of media. All body shaming is wrong, but there it is. I'm fat and I think all comments about other people's bodies are awful and should not be made. I'm sorry about the comments you received, OP. It might be because being skinny is not seen as a sign of weakness or disregard, whereas people are under the assumption that all heavy people have weak will and are therefore less worthy. In fact, a lot of heavy PPL have medical conditions and cannot afford proper treatment. True, some have given up. Some are weak-willed. A lot are not. Regardless, they should not be judged on someone else's assumptions when they do not know the details. Also, fat, skinny, short, tall, whatever, all people are beautiful. It's their actions that determine worthiness, not their looks. Because obesity is seen as a lack of character discipline, whereas being too skinny is seen as a genuine health concern. I can relate to you. I did have an eating disorder, but it was related to an anxiety disorder. Long story, but I would think food was making me sick, and I was terrified of throwing up or of having diarrhea. I was endlessly teased and questioned. Don't worry, if you are naturally thin, if it bothers you that much, you can talk to a doctor and nutritionist about how to put on weight in a healthy way. Once you have stopped growing, you will probably start to fill out. In a very tiny nutshell, in the last several generations, being overly thin became highly fashionable. In the 60s there was a model who was thinner than most other models. Pretty, and kind of quirky looking. She goes by Twiggy. She's still alive and you may have heard of her, a nickname she received for being so skinny. Anyway, fashion photographers and designers fell head over heels for her aesthetic, and then it was a very slippery slope to where other models were imitating Twiggy's look so much, were told to do so, that it became the industry standard. These days, thankfully, that is starting to change. Some modeling agencies will now have a minimum weight, where it used to be an unhealthy maximum. So many models were dying or quitting because they were so thin. I remember one model dying after she had restricted herself to just tomatoes and water. Something like that. I'm getting off track. People would see models in ads and actors and movies stars and want to emulate their standards too. And that's how being skinny became far more socially acceptable than being fatter. Oh, for your information, I got over the fear of eating stuff around grade 10, so that's when I started to not be so skeletal, and now that I'm approaching oldness, I can flatly tell you I'm fat and I don't like it, but there's nothing wrong with that either. I'm just having a hard time when I have to dress myself. Oof, I feel like being skinny has been a desirable trait for so long that it's not as shamed, but when someone is overly skinny, they are attacked for it when sometimes they literally can't help it. It's a fine line, I think, but it won't stop people from attacking each other about it. It's weird and it sucks. Sorry you have to deal with that. But besides that, at least in America, there's so many people who are overweight or worse that if you attack one person about it, like a whole flock of people who have the same body type will jump at whoever said it. Everyone should probably just mind their own business, work on their own mental health, and stop projecting their insecurities on random PPL. Because teens are stupid and adults who maintain such a mindset are immature. The reason this is true is that they will find any and every reason to put others down to lift themselves up. Give heck to their face, to show they can't get that from you, and do your best not to give the animals any more of your time. To answer, skinny shaming is just as bad and harmful. It's overshadowed by fat shaming, and the absurd societal notion that one thing is opposite from another, and so, in order to lift pressure off of one, you must place pressure on the other. Do your best to be good to yourself, by listening to and giving more credit to the people that lift you up. Whether that's someone you know personally, a celebrity, or a character from fiction, we all need some support. Remember that there is such a thing as perfect imperfection. Sincerely, someone who was seriously fat shamed. In part because of stuff like clothing. Skinny people can always find clothing to cover their bodies. It might not be flattering because it's baggy or whatever, but it is always there. That's not always true for fat people. Most stores in the mall don't go past a size 12, women's. Being super skinny probably isn't fun, but life still favors the skinny end of the spectrum rather than the fat side. Skinny shaming isn't acceptable and shouldn't be justified. I agree it's not right, and I don't think we should pretend that it can't be harmful. Women's bodies should not be the subject of open public discourse. However, I will say as a woman who has been fat and thin that the sheer hostility you encounter as a fat woman is pretty incomparable to what I experienced when I was thin. The difference in the way people treated me, especially men, was legitimately shocking. After I lost a bunch of weight, people would go out of their way when I was heavier to condescend to me about eating habits, exercise, and just generally insult my body at random intervals for literally no reason. I never experienced anything like that when I was thin, on the caveat that I was never hyper thin in a way that made me look possibly sick. Women who have ultra slim, almost bony bodies I can see getting a lot of crap in a way bigger women do. I won't talk crap about thin women or say anything, unless I knew them personally and thought something was wrong. That is, a sudden drop gain that I'd discuss privately with them. Nor would I downplay the pain another's mockery causes them. But that is something I expect people who are naturally thinner in media standard ways to acknowledge. That it is a privilege to not be fat and fit traditional beauty standards. I don't begrudge them, but I don't baby them, either. I've been called a Holocaust victim by my mother, also a corpse, cancer patient, and crackhead several times. I am ashamed of my body. As a skinny person, I was bullied in school for being thin, so much so that there were rumors that I was bulimic or anorexic, and I had to go to the school counselor and my parents were called to school about it. Had to see doctor for nothing because of this rumors. Girls would make throw up sounds near me and laugh. The thing was, I was malnutrition as a child because I lived in Peru and my father, who didn't know about me, found out about me. I ate a lot of food and tried to get to a good weight. So yes, any kind of body shaming sucks. The only reason I can think of as to why people take skinny shaming less seriously is like the jokes about the billionaires losing money because are still not poor. So yeah, someone commented on a thin person's weight. At least they are still not fat. I feel like a lot of the top comments miss the point. Yes, skinny shaming is bad, but fat shaming is a systemic problem that goes beyond bullying. Overweight individuals will be discriminated against, especially in a professional setting. They don't get taken as seriously. Their health is always written off due to their diet instead of other underlying issues from doctors. Skinny people don't experience these problems most of the time. If you are perceived as others to be slim, then you are in the more powerful position, because slim is widely considered to be a positive trait when it comes to the beauty standards in our society. Because you start out with that on your side, any shaming is considered less bad, because you are starting at level 1. Getting knocked to 0. Shaming someone who is overweight means they have 2 strikes against them not being the top level of our beauty standards. Then getting bullied, which means they are starting at 0. Getting knocked down to -1. Not saying it's right or it has anything to do with how each person actually feels inside, but that's just the surface level explanation. While I agree skinny shaming is bad as well, I've personally never seen skinny shaming reach nearly a level of cruelty that fat shaming has reached. Never known someone bullied into killing themselves for being skinny. Being fat was the butt of every joke in every movie for like 40 years. Again, shaming of any kind is a useless and cruel tactic, but to answer your question, this is why I think. I find it unfair because metabolism affects so much. I have a friend who has a really fast metabolism. He eats like twice as much as I do and I can see his ribs on his back, etc. But he can't grow muscles, almost at all. I eat very little in comparison to him and I'm struggling to keep the weight, as in body fat, down, even though I grow muscle mass really fast and easily and am a lot taller. So, can we just accept the fact that people's bodies are naturally different? I grow muscle and gain fat fast, while for someone else, both of those are really slow. Probably because being skinny is socially preferred to being fat. It's not to justify any of it, but it is likely the reason there aren't droves of people trying to end skinny shaming. That, and there's way more overweight folks than underweight folks, at least in the US. The same bee that try to insult me for being thin and barking about real men like curves are complaining about being overweight and how they can't lose weight 5 minutes later. I've never said anything mean to anyone's face or whatever about their weight or told them to stop eating so much, but I've gotten so many nasty comments from women who were bigger than me about me being thin and assuming I'm anorexic or whatever. I need to stop starving myself. As if that's the only way to not be overweight. But that's my experience anyway. Because everybody is fat and no one wants to hear that it's their fault. If everyone was skinny, then it would be reversed. Because skinny shaming happens on the individual level, not on a societal level. You aren't going to be seen as borderline inhuman because of your weight, unlike fat people, and this is coming from someone who's struggled with anorexia for years. For example, I was made fun of during my childhood for being extremely pale, and to this day it's an insecurity of mine. I wouldn't for a second consider saying to a black woman who was bullied for her skin color we experience the same thing, because we absolutely did not. I'm aware that at the end of the day that white skin is valued over dark skin in the part of the world where I live. It's the same with weight. Yes, it hurts and nobody should be shaming anyone else's body. But thin bodies like yours and mine simply aren't the target of systemic hate in the way that fat bodies are. Hope this helps. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.